In fact, on today's first panel, we'll hear from two witnesses from the American Bar Association, the ABA, whose assessment, particularly by Democrat leaders, I like to quote that they refer to it as the gold standard of judicial evaluation, has rated Judge Kavanaugh unanimously well qualified to serve on the Supreme Court. I'm going to tell you a little bit now how today's going to evolve. Each ABA witness will have 5 minutes to make an opening statement. We'll then have 5-minute rounds of senators questioning of the panel. We will have 3 more panels after the ABA panel, where we will hear from 26 additional witnesses. We will have 26 additional witnesses. Many of these witnesses include the judge's former law clerks, students, friends, and associates. They will help make the case that not only is Judge Kavanaugh one of the most qualified nominees that we have, Judge Kavanaugh is also an exceptional judge, teacher, coach, volunteer, and dad, and I'm sure we'll hear that. Now, I want to point out one person that's going to come on a later panel because he has deep Iowa roots. I'm pleased and proud to hear from Professor Adam White. Grew up in Dubuque, Iowa, graduated from Dubuque Willett High School, the University of Iowa, and Harvard Law School. And Adam's parents live in Bettendorf, Iowa. So he's probably not here yet, but I welcome Adam, and I hope to meet his parents as well. We will divide the time equally between the majority's 13 and the minority's 13 witnesses. Each witness have 5 minutes to make an opening statement, then 5 rounds for senator questioning of each of the 3 panels. Our first panel today will feature 2 representatives from the ABA Standing Committee of the Federal Judiciary, Paul Moxley and John Tarpley. I'd like to have you folks stand now so that I can swear you. You swear that the testimony you're about to give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yeah. Before you give your testimony, I know a fine lawyer in Des Moines by the name of Mr. Brown who does a lot of what you're doing, and I know he spends a lot of time doing it and takes it very seriously. So let's, did you 2 folks?
Do I get to make a
I'm sorry, you do get to make a statement. Hey, I apologize. Go ahead, you should make a statement, yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any questions for the 2 panelists, but I want to thank them both for all the hard work the ABA does, not just on the evaluation of Judge Kavanaugh, but on your evaluation of all of the district and circuit court nominees that come before the committee. I, in particular, pay special attention to the recommendation, and for me, speaking personally, it is very important, and I want you to know that, and I believe I speak for members on my side as well. For decades, the American Bar has provided an analysis of judicial nominations to provide the Senate and the American public with an important assessment of a nominee's qualifications. So thank you. The kind of rating it is to some extent what colleagues know of colleagues. And I think it's important because we see one side of a person, but the ABA sees their professional side and hears about their professional side, and I think that's very important. The rating is not determinative, and by no means is it the only consideration necessary to evaluate a nominee. It does provide the useful insight into whether the nominee has the legal competence, temperament, and integrity to be elevated to the federal bench. And I think it's critically important for the ABA to be allowed to follow its process and finish its work before a nominee has a hearing. And I know I am, Mr. Chairman, speaking for our side on that point, because this enables the committee to ask questions of the nominee, especially if the ABA's evaluation suggests areas of concern in the nominee's record. So I hope we can return to such a process. Once again, thank you for your hard work and welcome today. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Moxley, do you want to start for your group?
Happy to.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member Feinstein. We're honored to be here today representing our committee and explain our evaluation of Judge Kavanaugh. We gave him the highest rating possible, which is unanimously well qualified. For over 60 years, we have conducted thorough, nonpartisan, non-ideological peer review of nominees to the federal courts. We assess the nominees' integrity, professional competence, and judicial temperament. The Standing Committee does not propose, endorse, or recommend nominees. We only evaluate the professional qualifications of a nominee to the courts. I'm from Salt Lake City. John Tarpley, to my left, is from Nashville, Tennessee. And in the gallery is Bob Trout. And we are also assisted by Pam Bresnahan, who was the chair of this committee in July when the nomination came in. To be a nominee to the Supreme Court, one must possess exceptional professional qualifications. As such, our investigations of a nominee is much more extensive than the other federal courts. First, all of the circuit members of the committee, which are 14, participate in the evaluation. Every federal circuit in the country is covered by these 14 people, and not just the circuit in which the nominee resides. Second, while the Standing Committee independently reviews the writings of the nominee, we also commission 3 reading groups. In this instance, we had the University of Maryland, the University of Utah, and a professional group. And in this group of people were approximately 48 law professors and distinguished practitioners. Members of the reading groups independently evaluated factors such as the judge's analytical abilities, the clarity of writing, knowledge of the law, application of the law to the facts, expertise in harmonizing a body of law, and the ability to communicate effectively. We contacted and solicited input from almost 500 people who are likely to have knowledge of his qualifications, including federal and state judges, lawyers, and bar representatives. Some of these people were identified in his Senate questionnaire, which you're also familiar with. Also, our committee had a confidential evaluation performed on Judge Kavanaugh in the years 2003, 2005, and 2006 when he was nominated to the D.C. Circuit Court. We also, Mr. Tarpley, myself, Mr. Trout, met with the judge for about 3.5 hours in early August, and since then have talked to him regularly on the telephone, had email exchanges, and the like. We concluded that his integrity, judicial temperament, and professional competence met the highest standards for appointment to the court. Our rating of unanimously well qualified reflects the consensus of his peers who have knowledge of his professional qualifications, and we reached out to a broad range of legal professionals, including almost 500 people, and we conducted about 120 personal interviews. And with that, that concludes my opening statement.
Mr. Tarpley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Feinstein, and members of the committee. Good morning. I'm John Tarpley. As my colleague Paul Moxley reported, I am the lead evaluator of the American Bar Association's investigation of Judge Kavanaugh's nomination to the United States Supreme Court. It's my privilege to be here, and it's my privilege to present this testimony on behalf of the committee's evaluation of Judge Kavanaugh's professional qualifications. Let me point out at the start, the Standing Committee did not consider Judge Kavanaugh's ideology, his political views, or his political affiliation. It did not solicit information with regard to how Judge Kavanaugh might review on specific issues or cases that could come before the United States Supreme Court. Rather, the ABA Standing Committee's evaluation of Judge Kavanaugh was based on a comprehensive, nonpartisan, non-ideological peer review of integrity, professional competence, and judicial temperament. In evaluating integrity, the Standing Committee considers the nominee's character and general reputation in the legal community, his industry, and his diligence. The Standing Committee found that Judge Kavanaugh enjoys an excellent reputation for integrity and is a person of outstanding character. It was clear from all of our interviews and other lengthy conversations that he learned the importance of integrity from a very early age and throughout his life. Importantly, many of the lawyers, judges, and others interviewed praised his integrity. They said his integrity is absolutely unquestioned. He is a person of the highest morality and the highest ethics. He is what he seems, very decent, humble, and honest. Another said he always seeks to be fair. He is not result-oriented. He wants to do the right thing. On the basis of our comprehensive evaluation process, the Standing Committee concluded that Judge Kavanaugh possesses the integrity for our highest rating, a unanimous well-qualified. Professional competence. This encompasses qualities such as intellectual capacity, judgment, writing, analytical abilities, knowledge of the law, and breadth of professional experience. A Supreme Court must possess all of these exceptional qualities. Judge Kavanaugh's professional competence easily exceeds these very high criteria. One of the reading group members noted in reviewing his scholarly work, their view was that Judge Kavanaugh writes and analyzes the law and the application of the facts to law, and that with exceptional clarity, and that his opinions are well organized, resulting in clear precedent. Another said Judge Kavanaugh is an excellent writer with a flair for making complicated facts very understandable. Given the breadth, diversity, and strength of the positive feedback we receive from judges and lawyers from all parts of the profession, the committee would have been hard-pressed to come to any conclusion other than that Judge Kavanaugh has demonstrated exceptional professional competence. Those with whom he has worked and those who have been involved in cases over which he has presided have applauded his intellectual acumen, his thoughtful discernment, and his written clarity. As a result, the ABA's Standing Committee has determined that Judge Kavanaugh possesses sufficiently outstanding professional competence to be rated unanimously well qualified. In evaluating judicial temperament, the ABA Standing Committee considers a nominee's compassion, decisiveness, open-mindedness, courteousness, patience, and freedom from bias. Lawyers and judges overwhelmingly praise Judge Kavanaugh's judicial temperament. They said, among other things, he is very straightforward. He maintains an open mind about all things. He is an affable, nice person. He is easy to get along with and even has a good sense of humor. Can you imagine that, a judge with a good sense of humor? He is really a decent person. His temperament is terrific. He is thoughtful, fair-minded, always fair-minded in his questions to counsel. Thus, our highest rating in this category. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, I note that the ABA Standing Committee shares the goal of your committee to assure a qualified and independent judiciary for the American people. On behalf of the ABA's more than 400,000 members from one end of the country to the other, I want to thank you for the opportunity to present this statement explaining our evaluation. We are a very diverse group of lawyers, and we agreed unanimously that Judge Kavanaugh meets our highest standards and rated him as unanimously well qualified to serve as an Associate Justice on the United States Supreme Court. Thank you again for this opportunity, and thank you for your service.
Questions of you. I'm going to start with Senator Graham, but before I do that, I just want to thank you not only for your testimony, but you and your colleagues that did this review. We thank you very much for that part of your public service and your dedication to the rule of law. Senator Graham and then Senator Feinstein.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was an incredible explanation and overview of a well-lived life. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
He sounds like a great judge, but a lousy politician. He has no chance in my business. What I would like to do is thank you, because very seldom do we have moments like this in modern politics where you pick people outside the realm of politics to give us some insight about a person like you have done. Often, not often, but sometimes we disagree with the ABA's rating from a Republican point of view. I'm glad you do what you do. I want it to continue. When you reach a conclusion that I disagree with, it won't be because I don't respect your opinion. From this committee's point of view, I think this is a valuable input. Some of us think you may be more left than right at times as an association, but that doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is the quality of your work, and I think you do the country a great service. So just to sum up, intellect, A+.
Absolutely.
Agree with that, Mr. Moxley?
Yes.
Integrity, A+.
A++.
Again, we have nothing in common. I don't with Judge Kavanaugh. So, as far as A++, I think I've got integrity, but I'm not gonna put myself in the category of this man in terms of his ability to impress his peers. Would you say he's mainstream in terms of being a judge?
Absolutely. He's at the top of the stream.
Okay. Have you ever heard the word radical used when it came to Judge Kavanaugh?
No.
Not in all of the evaluations that we've done, and we communicated with more than 100 lawyers and judges who work with him on a regular basis.
If he's confirmed, do you think the court will be in good hands if he's a member of it?
We gave him our unanimously well-qualified rating. It's our highest rating, absolutely.
You agree with that, Mr. Moxley?
Absolutely.
Are either one of you running for president?
Oh, no.
Thank you.
I'll save that job for you, Senator.
Didn't work out.
Senator Feinstein.
I have no questions, except to say that I think the report in writing is very helpful. I think the individuals' names that are down here who have participated in different aspects of it is very helpful. I think we have something that becomes part of the standing record.
Yes.
And there has been some controversy about the ABA, as you probably know. And I think the way to really solve it are reports like this, which are thorough and contemplative and helpful. So thank you.
Thank you.
We understood we needed to make a motion for the admission of the statement as well.
I just think it's automatically accepted because we always say you have 5 minutes and a longer written statement would be included. Senator Cruz, or go ahead, Senator Cruz.
I don't have any questions, but I want to briefly enter into the record.
I should say that we do all this without objection. I don't hear any objections, so that the report is received. Go ahead.
So I want to briefly enter into the record a letter from the Solicitors General of 12 states, including the state of Texas. These SGs have written in their personal capacities to express our strong support for the confirmation of Judge Brett Kavanaugh. They write, quote, "The Solicitor General serves as the state's chief appellate litigator. Thus, we represent our states in the U.S. Supreme Court, carefully study the work of the court, and have a keen appreciation for the role that the court plays in safeguarding the rule of law, including vital federalism and separation of powers principles. In our view, Judge Kavanaugh would make an outstanding addition to the nation's highest court. Throughout his distinguished career, Judge Kavanaugh has demonstrated an unwavering commitment to preserving the rule of law and advancing the legal profession. And so I'd like to enter this in the record.
Without objection, it will be received. Senator Coons.
Let me just ask both of you one question, if I might. Would it concern you if we proceeded to consider a nominee for a judicial post without taking into account the ABA's advice?
Oh?
Yes.
I'll just add to that. Paul knows that I'm the wordy one of this duo, but I will add to that. Yes, I think it is. It's an incremental part of the process. It's an important part. I'm a lawyer. I'm really interested in the kinds of judges that we have. All of our 410,000 members bring a unique perspective to this process. Our individual committee members bring a unique, serious perspective to the process. It's valuable work. We believe that we do, and we think it's important to the process.
What I would add to that is that the thing that's hard to get your mind around is that if you have practitioners from a particular district or circuit and they're well known to the courts, and you call the judges in your district or the lawyers in your district, they're going to be, because they know you, they're going to be more honest and candid with you about a particular, and since it's confidential, and part of our rule is that if someone brings up negative information about a nominee, unless we take that information back to the nominee for them to rebut it, we don't use it. But it gives the work that we do more authenticity, at least in our minds it does. And obviously we're doing this on a pro bono basis, and we think it's important, or we wouldn't be doing it.
Well,
because
thank you.
We're interested in having good courts, and we represent everyday people who are dependent on the courts.
I consult and rely on the ABA ratings when I'm considering district court, circuit court, and obviously Supreme Court nominations. I appreciate your input both on Justice Kavanaugh, but this is input that I look for every time we're doing a confirmation hearing, and I think it's valuable, and I think it ought to be part of our regular process. I appreciate your appearing before us today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Crable.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't have a question, but now I do. I, too, appreciate deeply the work that the ABA does and the ratings and reviews that it gives on all of our candidates. To me, that's not the question that this committee has been struggling with. The question is whether the ABA, or anybody for that matter, should be given a blackball and be able to prohibit or ban a candidate from being considered by this committee if it doesn't give it its approval. What are your thoughts on that?
Incidentally, one of your fellow from Idaho was chair of this committee, Tim Hopkins.
A great attorney,
Great
friend.
Great lawyer and great man. I don't think that we only see our part of the ball. And what we're familiar with is the competence of nominees, their integrity, and their judicial temperament. You may have other considerations that aren't on our mind. And I don't think we blackball them. We just give our recommendations.
Mr. Tarpley?
I agree with that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And thank you for your testimony here today. I
Absolutely.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I want to join in thanking you for your excellent work and the values that you uphold in this work, the highest traditions of our profession, which is advocacy for people regardless of their station in life, their status, their background, their race or religion. And for that kind of advocacy to work, we need judicial independence. And I want to thank you for making that a specific criterion in your report. And you remarked that you believe that Judge Kavanaugh would uphold judicial independence. I hope that you join me in the very, very strong feeling that attacks by public officials, and I'm not going to mince words, by the President of the United States on our independent judiciary are a disservice to judicial independence and the integrity of our judicial system.
I can respond quickly on that one, Paul. The ABA feels very strongly that a fair and independent judiciary is a linchpin of our society. The Founding Fathers set it up like that. It's survived all these hundreds of years. And we feel very strongly about the fair and independent judiciary.
What I would add to that is that a federal district court can declare an executive order as unconstitutional, enter injunctions. That's also true for legislative bills. And that's an integral part of our legal system, the federalism and the fact that each branch of government is co-equal.
But attacks on the courts that undermine the faith and confidence of the public in the credibility of our courts are a real blow to judicial independence, are they not?
I don't disagree with that.
I want to just note for the record that both of our guests seem to be in agreement with that proposition, and I thank you very much.
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. Do you have colleagues in the audience who worked with you on this effort?
Certainly. We mentioned Bob Trout, a distinguished lawyer here in the District of Columbia, just immediately behind us, who was our local person on the ground who did a tremendous amount of work, and Denise Cardman, our staff representative from the American Bar Association. We're proud of both of them.
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, may I ask them to stand?
Yes. Would you please?
I want to thank all of you for your hard work and your input.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Senator Whitehouse, do you have a question?
Sure. Gentlemen, your evaluation of the nominee related to his qualifications and produced a conclusion that he was well qualified?
Unanimously well qualified.
In the evaluation of the nominee's qualifications, did you have a chance to look at any patterns in his decisions on the court?
We looked at a number of decisions. Our reading group examined every decision that he rendered. They read many of his writings. To be candid, I did not see a pattern in his decisions. If there is a pattern to the decision, it's what we saw was an allegiance to the law, a dedication to looking at the facts of each particular case and applying the law to the facts of that case, and a faithfulness to precedent.
Did you make any effort to cross-reference who the parties or amici were in these cases in that review?
Yeah, I'll answer that, Senator, and I'm not sure if you were here during the beginning part of our remarks.
I wasn't.
But we had 3 different reading groups who participated in this evaluation, and there were 2 different law schools that participated, University of Utah and University of Maryland. And then we had a practitioners group, and this consisted of 48 people who broke the law in the different areas and gave us a report on their
and in that evaluation, did it take into account what amici, for instance, were appearing before the court?
the amicus curiae that appeared before the court.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a part of the record in every case.
Obviously, but was that part of your analysis?
We did not look at who the parties were to the
Or
case.
who the amici were?
When the cases were read, it was considered as to who the parties were,
Yeah.
as well as who all the amicus curiae were.
But in terms of looking for any pattern, there was no cross-referencing between decisions and who amici and parties were.
Don't think so.
Okay, just wanted to check. Well, the reason I asked that question, to be totally upfront about it, is that as we showed earlier, when certain amici come before the D.C. Circuit, amici who tend to be associated with and funded by very powerful, very wealthy right-wing interests, they seem to have a better than 90% win rate in front of this particular judge. And I know that he says that he makes decisions based only on the quality of the legal work and the argument before him, in which case it seems that these particular amici seem to have some very superhuman lawyering going their way, because a win rate above 90% to me is a bit of a signal that there may be something else going on to pursue. Since you never looked at that underlying statistic, presumably you drew no conclusions about it.
That's correct. But
Okay,
if,
thank you.
if it'd be helpful to the senator, we could have the reading groups look at that particular question.
I don't know that we have time, but I'll consider that. I'll get back to you.
Thank you, Senator.
Let's see. I guess all my colleagues have asked the questions they want to ask, so we thank you, and we'll call the second panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
We'll wait just a minute while people get the right names up here, and then we'll have the second panel come. Indicated to the audience that we have 3 more panels where we will hear 26 additional witnesses. Many of these witnesses include Judge Kavanaugh's former law clerk, students, friends, and associates. Our next panel includes the following 10 witnesses, 5 for the majority and 5 for the minority. We have Congressman Richmond, Mr. McLeod, Ms. Garcia, Gary Weintraub, Olson, Ms. Baker, Ms. Sinzak, Professor Murray, and Professor Amar. Let's see. I would ask if you would stand, and so I should have said this before you sat down. I'm sorry. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you for your affirmation. Now, when the congressman comes, this will be his introduction. Cedric Richmond is the U.S. Representative, 2nd District, Louisiana. Currently serves as chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus. Luke McLeod serves as law clerk for Judge Kavanaugh, 13 and 14 years. 2013, 2014. He also served as law clerk for Niemeyer, U.S. Court of Appeals, 4th, Justice Sotomayor, Supreme Court, and he's an associate Williams and Connolly. Rochelle Garza serves as managing attorney of Garza and Garza Law, located in Brownsville, Texas. Louisa Gary is a teacher at Friends Academy, Locust Valley, New York. She has known Judge Kavanaugh for 35 years. Liz Weintraub is an advocate specialist at the Association University Centers on Disabilities, Silver Springs, Maryland. She previously served as a fellow in Senator Bob Casey's office. Ted Olson is a partner of Gibson, Dunn, and Crutcher. He served as Solicitor General of the United States 2001, 2004, and as Assistant Attorney General in charge of the Office of Legal Counsel 1981 to 84. He's argued more than 60 cases before the Supreme Court. Alicia Baker is a pastor of the Free Methodist Church in Indiana. Colleen Rowe Sinzak is a senior associate, Hogan Lovells. She previously served as law clerk for Chief Justice Roberts and Judge Garland on the D.C. Circuit. Ms. Sindak is a student of Judge Kavanaugh's Harvard Law School. Professor Melissa Murray, professor of law at New York University School of Law. She previously served as a law professor at University of California, Berkeley. Professor Akil Amar is a Sterling Professor of Law, Political Science at Yale University, where he teaches constitutional law in both Yale College and Yale Law School. After graduating from Yale Law School, the professor served as a law clerk to then Judge Breyer on the U.S. Court of Appeals, First Circuit. The professor taught Judge Kavanaugh when he was a student at Yale Law School. So we'll start with you, Mr. McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Feinstein, members of the committee. I'm honored to speak with you today about my former boss and my current friend and mentor, Judge Kavanaugh. I had the privilege of serving as one of Judge Kavanaugh's law clerks from 2013 to 2014. During that time, I worked closely with the judge, day in, day out, helping him to prepare for arguments and draft opinions. I witnessed firsthand the judge's approach to deciding cases large and small. What I saw leaves no doubt that Judge Kavanaugh would make an outstanding Supreme Court justice. I need your signature. Judge Kavanaugh is a fair-minded and independent jurist, regardless of the parties to the case or the issues being litigated. Judge Kavanaugh worked hard to understand every argument and perspective. There was always another opinion to read, another piece of the record to review, another angle to explore. That was true even when a case turned on legal issues the judge knew well. He never looked for an easy answer or assumed that he had considered all of the relevant points. Judge Kavanaugh pushed himself to master every aspect of the cases he worked on, and he expected his clerks to do the same. To be sure, Judge Kavanaugh and I did not always see eye to eye on what the law required, but the judge did not want clerks who reflexively agreed with him or who never offered a contrary opinion. Just the opposite. Judge Kavanaugh has made a point of surrounding himself with a diverse group of law clerks, diverse ideologically, diverse racially, and from diverse backgrounds, so that he can better understand all sides of a given issue. I can vividly recall spending hours with my fellow clerks gathered around the judge's desk, debating the meaning of some statutory phrase or the best way to understand a precedent. Invariably, the opinions that Judge Kavanaugh produced reflected his careful consideration of and respect for views other than his own. Moreover, when we disagreed, I always knew that Judge Kavanaugh had come to his position honestly, based on a rigorous analysis of the strengths and weaknesses of the arguments before him. There was no hidden agenda or partisan axe to grind, just the law, always the law. These qualities have earned Judge Kavanaugh a sterling reputation for his work on the bench. But Judge Kavanaugh has also shown himself to be a leader when it comes to his work outside of chambers. I especially admire Judge Kavanaugh's efforts as an advocate for those who are underrepresented in the legal profession. He regularly speaks to diverse law student associations to encourage their members to apply for clerkships. The judge also actively mentors the minority students he teaches, helping them become future leaders within the law. Judge Kavanaugh's commitment to promoting the careers of minority attorneys is also apparent from his own clerk hiring. Of his 48 law clerks, 13 are racial minorities, including 5 African Americans. These percentages are nearly unheard of amongst his peers. Many of the judge's minority law clerks have gone on to clerk for the Supreme Court, something that is still all too uncommon in these days. I am fortunate to count myself among them, but I would not have even applied for that position had it not been for the support and encouragement of Judge Kavanaugh. Again and again, during the year I worked for him, Judge Kavanaugh showed himself to be a model of judicial excellence. But even more than his intelligence and his diligence, it is Judge Kavanaugh's character, his fundamental decency and kindness that inspired me then and continues to inspire me now. Despite being one of the most prominent judges of his generation, Judge Kavanaugh remains humble and gracious. He is unfailingly polite to everyone he interacts with at the courthouse, from his colleagues on the bench to litigants to the court's professional staff. Judge Kavanaugh also volunteers regularly in his community and encourages all he knows to do the same. He is, in short, a dedicated public servant in the truest sense of those words. I will always be proud, incredibly proud, of the time I spent as Judge Kavanaugh's law clerk, and I am prouder still today to support his confirmation to the Supreme Court. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in this hearing on the nomination of Judge Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court of the United States. My name is Rochelle Garza. I'm an attorney and managing member of Garza & Garza Law, PLLC in Brownsville, Texas, along with my brother-in-law partner, Miles R. Garza. My practice is focused on working with children, immigrants, and victims of violence, including unaccompanied minor children, through the areas of immigration, family, and criminal law. I am proud to have been the guardian ad litem for the young woman known as Jane Doe, an unaccompanied immigrant minor who the Trump administration attempted to block from accessing abortion. And I am here today to talk about what this experience was like for Jane and the impact that Judge Kavanaugh's ruling had on her life. Jane was 17 when she left her home in Central America, where she was physically abused by her parents and traveled thousands of miles to seek safety. In September of 2017, she arrived in the United States after a long and dangerous journey. As she later said, "My journey wasn't easy, but I came here with hope in my heart to build a life I can be proud of." She was put into the custody of the Office of Refugee Resettlement and placed at a facility for immigrant children in the Rio Grande Valley. There, Jane learned she was pregnant. She immediately knew she did not wish to proceed with the pregnancy and expressed this to the facility staff. But as we were about to learn, Jane would face unprecedented obstruction by the Trump administration. I will never forget meeting Jane for the first time. She was petite, 17-year-old. But as I quickly learned, no one should underestimate her. Her resolve was strong, and she was very certain about her decision to terminate her pregnancy. In Texas, minors seeking to terminate their pregnancies must obtain parental consent or a judicial bypass, which is an order from the court allowing the minor to consent to the procedure on her own. It was in that context that I was appointed Jane's guardian ad litem. A state court granted her bypass, and we scheduled her appointments and confirmed the medical costs would be covered by a private source. It was then that the government stepped in and ordered the facility to prevent her from going to her medical appointments. The way that Jane was treated was unbearable. Even after she made her decision, she was forced to undergo biased counseling, including a medically unnecessary sonogram, at an anti-abortion crisis pregnancy center. As Jane later said, "People I don't even know are trying to make me change my mind. I made my decision, and that is between me and God." Against Jane's objections, they told her mother she was pregnant and wanted an abortion. And even though Jane disclosed that when her older sister became pregnant, her parents had beaten her until she miscarried. Jane was placed under constant surveillance and no longer allowed to leave on outings or exercise. Despite all of this, Jane was strong. She was determined not to be forced to carry the pregnancy to term against her will. So we fought back on her behalf. We filed a lawsuit in Texas State Court to require the facility to allow Jane to be transported. At the same time, the ACLU pursued a constitutional lawsuit in federal court in D.C. on my behalf as Jane's guardian ad litem. Although the ACLU represents me, to be clear, I'm testifying on my own behalf. The ACLU obtained an emergency order from the district court to stop the government from blocking Jane's abortion, but the government appealed. Judge Kavanaugh issued an order giving the government 11 more days to find a sponsor for Jane, something they had already failed to do for the previous 6 weeks. Furthermore, at the end of those 11 days, Judge Kavanaugh's order would not have granted Jane could finally get the care she needed. Rather, she would have to start her case all over again, and the government could appeal. This could have taken weeks and might have forced her to carry the pregnancy to term against her will, particularly because Texas bans abortion at 20 weeks, and Jane was already 15 weeks pregnant. The pain that this caused her is impossible to describe. Throughout her ordeal, I saw her suffer. No politician or judge saw firsthand what she went through. As she later said, it has been incredibly difficult to wait in the shelter for news that the judges in Washington, D.C. have given me permission to proceed with my decision. Thankfully, the full appeals court overturned Judge Kavanaugh's decision, and I was with her when she had her abortion. I saw the relief that she experienced when she was able to realize the decision that she knew was right for her. But at that point, Jane had been forced to remain pregnant against her will for an entire month, and from the time she obtained her judicial bypass. I am and will always be in awe of Jane, and she possessed a profound strength of character. She believed that no other girl should have to go through what she went through. And as she said, no one should be shamed for making the right decision for themselves. I can think of nothing more human or more American than what I saw in Jane. Knowing that she is now pursuing the life she hoped for gives me great pride. She may have been petite, but she ignited change. And just like she said, this is my life, my decision. It was an honor to represent her and to be by her side and to witness true perseverance and to share her story with this committee today. Thank you.
Ms. Gary.
Chairman Grassley and Ranking Member Feinstein. My name is Louisa Gary. I'm a high school teacher and coach, so it is unusual for me to not be in the classroom with my students on the first Friday after Labor Day. But I'm honored to be here to voice my support of my college classmate and longtime friend. I met Brett Kavanaugh in 1983, almost exactly 35 years ago today. We were both incoming freshmen at Yale. Brett was standing under a tent with his parents, waiting to depart for the freshman outdoor orientation. I grew up in a small town in Ohio and was accustomed to saying hello to everyone, so I walked up and introduced myself. Brett warmly received my greeting and thus began a friendship that continues to this day. Our enduring friendship might surprise some because in certain ways we are quite different. I've been teaching and coaching high school students for the last 30 years, while Brett pursued a high-profile career in law. Brett comes from a Catholic upbringing in a city and tends to have a conservative outlook, while I would describe myself as a moderate Quaker who seeks out running trails and ocean beaches. Our differences have allowed us to learn from each other and see things from a different perspective. We've maintained a close friendship based on our mutual respect, support, and trust. One of the things Brett and I do have in common is an appreciation for competitive sports. We both have daughters, and we often talk about the benefits of youth sports in raising strong, independent girls and women with confident voices. Brett and I not only watch a lot of sports, we also run together. We first started running together while Brett was in his first year of Yale Law School, and I was working at Yale and training to compete in the 1988 U.S. Olympic trials for track. Brett was not much of a runner, but he could keep up with me on an easy warm-up. After he ran his first 3-mile race, Brett announced that he wanted to run the Boston Marathon in his third year of law school. He asked me to promise to train and to run it with him, and I agreed. Even though I was a competitive runner, I had never run anything close to a marathon in distance. But Brett's faith in my ability as a runner and coach gave me confidence to take on this challenge. During the marathon, Brett waited for me through water stops and bathroom breaks, just as I waited for him through leg cramps and blisters. We ran together, step for step, for 26.2 miles and crossed the finish line at exactly the same time. We ran the Boston Marathon together again, step for step, 2 more times, in 2010, and most recently in 2015 in celebration of our 50th birthdays. 4 hours is a long time to spend with someone as you physically and mentally struggle through the miles, but I was lucky to go through it with Brett, whose humor, fortitude, and idealism elevates those around him. Brett and I share an interest in the growth and development of young people. Many people have heard about Brett's basketball coaching expertise, but I believe even more students have benefited from taking a class with Brett at Harvard, Yale, or Georgetown. Brett is a bright, articulate, and engaging educator, and he is generous with the time and attention he devotes to mentoring others. In November 2016, Brett welcomed juniors from my school to the federal court for a field trip to learn about the judicial system. As we prepared for the visit, my students wanted to know, is Judge Kavanaugh conservative or liberal? I responded that they should wait and determine the answer on their own. Brett spent over an hour with my class explaining his role as a judge, discussing current issues facing the Federal Court of Appeals, answering the students' questions, and listening to their voices. He spoke passionately about his belief in the judicial system and the importance of the separation of powers in government. As we left the federal court, a couple of students immediately remarked, "We couldn't tell. Is he conservative or liberal? Can you tell us?" I responded, "That's how it's supposed to be. The judiciary is supposed to be independent." Brett has a wide circle of friends of diverse political viewpoints, and often shows a willingness to step into potentially uncomfortable forums with a spirit of collegiality. At our 30th Yale College reunion, Brett joined a panel on free speech. The panel broadly represented the diverse perspectives of our classmates, and each of the panel members spoke respectfully about the challenges faced by universities in addressing issues of free speech. When discussing how to balance a wide range of opinions, Brett quoted the character Atticus Finch from the book To Kill a Mockingbird and emphasized how important it is to, quote, stand in a person's shoes. Brett doesn't just speak words of empathy and tolerance, he listens and acts upon these words. His friends and colleagues describe him as a kind, thoughtful person and a good listener. I leave it to others to speak to Brett's judicial record. I am here to speak to his outstanding qualities, personal qualities, as a lifelong friend. Brett Kavanaugh will be a voice of fairness and integrity as a justice of the Supreme Court. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gary. Now, Ms. Weintraub.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Feinstein, and the members of the committee for believing that I had something important to say about Judge Kavanaugh. 51 years ago, I was born with cerebral palsy and an intellectual disability. I entered a world that had low expectations for me and people like me. Judge Kavanaugh has shown that he has the same low expectations, and I'm here to tell you that he's wrong. I have achieved more than many thought possible for someone like me. I work full-time as a professional, where I host Tuesdays with Liz, a weekly YouTube series where I talk to people about policy in a way that people with intellectual disability can understand. You're all invited to be my guest on Tuesdays with Liz. Today I live with my husband, who also happens to have a disability. And together we make our own decision. It had not always been this way. In my 20s, some professionals and my parents decided to put me into a private institution. My parents love me, but instead of treating me like an adult with opinions and preferences and asking what I wanted, they made the decision for me like I was a child. This was wrong. In the self-advocacy movement, there's a saying that we hold very dear to our heart, and that's nothing about us without us. This means that any decision that affects us should include us. We expect to be part of the conversation, even to lead the conversation. Self-determination is a basic human right for all people with disability. People with intellectual disability have opinions and preferences, and they should be recognized. Judge Kavanaugh's nomination matters to me. Reading the Doe versus D.C. case made me very upset because Judge Kavanaugh's decision did not respect people's rights and their freedom of choice. This is wrong. The lower court in Doe told the D.C. government that it needed to ask people with intellectual disability if they wanted certain medical treatment. That requirement respects the civil rights of people with disability. Judge Kavanaugh had a chance to stand up for the rights of the women in the case, but he failed. He said that the D.C. government did not even need to ask them what they wanted, but could decide for them what was going to happen to their bodies. Would it have been too hard to ask them what they wanted? Every adult deserves to be treated like a grown-up and have the right to be asked what they wanted, especially when it's about their own bodies. if they need support to understand and make an informed choice, then give it to them. Our country is founded on liberty and justice for all, and all means all. I worry about a Supreme Court justice who doesn't believe that we, as people with intellectual disability, can make decisions for ourselves. If Judge Kavanaugh is confirmed, I'm afraid that my right to make decisions for myself will be taken away. I ask you, for myself and my community, when you vote on Judge Kavanaugh, please do not vote to turn the clock back and take the rights that I and others have fought for. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Weintraub. I assume that if you're like everybody in the House of Representatives, you're always busy and you'd like to go, that's why you're probably on first. So I think I'll go to Congressman Richmond. Welcome. I previously had introduced you as a congressman and chair of the Black Caucus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and we did have pending votes, so I want to thank you for the courtesy and apologize for being late, and I want to thank the ranking member, Senator Feinstein, for being here. Earlier this week, a senator argued that, or stated that, it's not the U.S. Supreme Court that's supposed to fix this country culturally, economically, socially, spiritually. Courts should not try to fix problems that are within the province of the U.S. Congress, even if the U.S. Congress does not have the courage to address those problems. Our courts were not meant to decide these kinds of issues. That logic would mean that African Americans wouldn't be able to attend integrated schools, buy a home previously owned by a white person, or lodge at certain hotels. In many cases, the High Court has acted when Congress had neither the courage nor the will to act. For nearly 8 decades, African Americans have fought to secure historic legal victories that have significantly bent the moral arc of the universe towards justice, even at times when progress felt incremental. Nonetheless, we know that reversing meaningful progress for decades to come would be profoundly devastating and an affront to all who courageously fought on the front lines, some of whom I currently represent as chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. President Trump has seized on this opportunity to pack the court by selecting judicial nominees who lack pragmatism and are often strikingly unqualified and proven intolerant bigots. We're in the midst of a fundamental shift towards nominees that embrace ideology at the fringes of mainstream legal thought. The current administration has nominated and with the help of Senate Republicans have confirmed a range of nominees whose confirmation hearings pretend a precarious legal fate for communities of color moving forward. Mr. Kavanaugh's confirmation will fortify a generation of destructive conservative ideology at a time when several historically significant legal challenges will come before the High Court. As members of the CBC, we cannot overstate what is at stake for African Americans and communities of color across the nation. Judge Kavanaugh, who relies heavily on the same textualist reading of the Constitution employed by former Justice Scalia, possesses a conservative judicial record that leads us to believe that voting rights, education, criminal law outcomes will be greatly endangered in the coming years. A careful, in-depth evaluation of his record, which has largely been shrouded in secrecy and withheld from public examination, uncovers writings that illustrate sparse commitment to equal protection under the law. Additionally, Judge Kavanaugh's lack of deference to precedent is staggering and inconsistent with other conservative judges who currently preside on the D.C. Circuit Court with him. A judge who frequently questions key legal precedents represents a grave danger to many legal frameworks that have advanced the African American community. Voting rights. From Ohio to Wisconsin to Georgia, the vestiges of Jim Crow have resurfaced under a new cloak, unchecked and unabated. While these states are no longer conducting literacy tests, the effects of their new policies have been implemented with staggering precision and efficiency. By a 5-4 vote more than 5 years ago, the court struck down Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, making Section 5 of the law essentially unworkable. The decision has precipitated a myriad of voter suppression efforts across the country. Most recently, the Randolph County Board of Elections and Registration in Georgia inexplicably considered a proposal calling for the closure of more than 3/4 of the polling locations in the 60% black county, including one location that is 97% African American. Despite the eventual rejection of this ill-fated proposal, the federal government never bothered to intervene and fulfill its statutory obligated responsibilities. Simply put, there is no longer any active federal mechanism dedicated to oversight and safeguarding an individual's constitutionally protected right to vote. As I told you in January of 2017, Jeff Sessions' record on civil rights is questionable and one that shows that he does not care about enforcing civil rights. It is within this context that we have grave concerns about Judge Kavanaugh's opinion in the 2012 case of State of South Carolina versus Holder. In 2011, under the Fully Viable Voting Rights Act of 1965, the Obama administration blocked enforcement of South Carolina's state-issued photo ID law because it affected up to 8% of black South Carolinians. In his ruling to uphold the law, Mr. Kavanaugh claimed it does not have the effects that some expected and some feared. Not only is this statement inexplicably tone deaf, it is also inconsistent with reality. These same real-life consequences reverberate to other elements of everyday life for black families. On criminal justice, Judge Kavanaugh's record on criminal justice is entirely unsatisfactory for a country persistently struggling to hold law enforcement accountable for mass incarceration and police brutality. He has expressed a desire to overturn precedent that protects civilians from officers engaging in activities inconsistent with the Fourth Amendment. He suggested that probable cause standards should be more flexible, which would expose more African Americans to failed policies, police tactics like stop and frisk. Additionally, Judge Kavanaugh's support for narrowing individuals' Miranda rights would hurt people of color who are disproportionately subject to excessive law enforcement engagement in their respective communities. And lastly, affirmative action. Mr. Kavanaugh's record on affirmative action is particularly disturbing and ripe for intense scrutiny. Almost 20 years ago, while in private practice, he wrote that in the future, the Supreme Court would agree that, in the eyes of government, we are just one race. Given the Department of Justice's recent investigation into Harvard University's admission practices, we're deeply troubled by the increased likelihood this will come before the Supreme Court in short order. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will submit the rest of my testimony for the record, but I will just conclude by saying that with the cloud of criminality and lack of transparency, the Congressional Black Caucus, which is 48 members, we represent 78 million Americans. And I just want to say for the record, of those 78 million, only 17 million are African American. We represent a vast variety of people, and we represent a collective conscience of this country, black, white, in the spirit of Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner, who gave their life to make this country a more perfect union and to fight for civil rights and to fight for justice. And it is within that spirit that we have grave concerns and oppose the nomination of Justice Kavanaugh. And thank you for your time, and I know I went over.
Very much, Congressman. Now we go to Mr. Olson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Feinstein, and members of this committee. I have had the privilege of practicing law throughout the United States for over 50 years in state and federal appellate courts and 63 times before the United States Supreme Court. I have argued to 20 different Supreme Court justices appointed by 11 presidents, from President Eisenhower to President Trump. 1/5 of our nation's justices appointed by 1/4 of our presidents. My experience has given me firsthand exposure to justices numerous presidents have selected for the Supreme Court, the qualities that these justices have exemplified, and the standards they have established for themselves and for their successors. Each of these justices has manifested the highest professional and jurisprudential standards, the qualities we expect in justices appointed by presidents of any political party. I have won and lost my share of decisions from justices appointed by presidents of every political background. I can say that in every case, my clients and arguments were received with respect, understanding, and great care. Americans are rightly proud of the Supreme Court and its justices, the envy of the world. I will elaborate on 5 of the characteristics that I have seen in Supreme Court justices. First, intelligence and learning. A justice on the Supreme Court must understand the Constitution, the separation of powers, the Bill of Rights, the role of each of the 3 branches of government, and federal laws ranging from antitrust and patents to criminal procedure and the environment, and I could go on and on. The court decides 75 cases each year involving an awesome range of complex subjects, demanding from each justice an extraordinary breadth of understanding, experience, erudition, judgment, and insight. Secondly, respect for precedent and judicial tradition. The justices before whom I have appeared have uniformly manifested abiding respect for the role of the judiciary and past decisions of the court. Not every precedent is inviolate, of course. As Justice Breyer has explained in his book, Making Democracy Work, the court has occasionally been mistaken or wrong, but its errors have generally been corrected over time. The justices are mindful of the importance of stare decisis and the public's reliance on past decisions, but within the context of overarching fealty to the meaning and intent of the Constitution and the rule of law. Third, open-mindedness and independence. Justices, of course, have their individual histories, predilections, and past writings, but each justice must examine every case on the merits, carefully review precedents, briefs and oral arguments, and the views of their colleagues, and only then come to a decision. Any other approach would, as Justice Ginsburg has explained, display disdain for the entire judicial process. Fourth, integrity. The justices of our Supreme Court, like our judiciary in general, reflect rock-solid integrity. We may strongly disagree with the court's decisions from time to time, but no credible critic would suggest that the court's decisions are corrupt or dishonest. Our citizens respect and obey even very unpopular decisions because they believe in the integrity of the judicial process and the honesty of our justices. Fifth, temperament. An open mind and respectful temperament and collegiality are vital to the Supreme Court. And the justices before whom I have appeared uniformly listened to and probed, often intensely, the arguments presented to them. But however strongly they have disagreed in a particular case, they have remained respectful, warm, and gracious to their colleagues and to the advocates who appeared before them. I have known Judge Kavanaugh for 2 decades. I know from personal observations and experience that he possesses and has consistently exemplified the qualities that I have described. He received an outstanding education in one of the nation's finest law schools, clerked for extraordinary jurists, including the justice he is being nominated to replace, taught constitutional law at Harvard Law School, served in the executive branch and in private practice, and for 12 years at the highest level of the federal appellate judiciary. He is thoughtful, gracious, open-minded, respected by his peers, and widely praised by the lawyers who have appeared before him. Our system contemplates that justices will be appointed by presidents of either party. As lawyers who appear before the court, and as Americans who must live with the court's decisions, we cannot expect that our cases will be decided by jurists who always agree with our positions. But we can aspire to a judiciary that will be prepared, perceptive, competent, open-minded, honest, and respectful. That is the jurist that is Brett Kavanaugh. He is the kind of person and judge that we expect and deserve on the Supreme Court. I hope you will confirm his appointment to this court.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. Now, Ms. Baker.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Alicia Wilson Baker. I am a pro-life Christian and ordained minister from Indiana. I'm someone who's denied the birth control I needed because of my insurance company's religious beliefs. And I'm honored to be here today, truly honored, to speak on behalf of everyday women. If Judge Kavanaugh is confirmed to the Supreme Court, I fear that many women, especially those who can least afford it, will not get access to affordable birth control because of their employer's religious beliefs. Birth control allows women and people to control their lives, and without it, women's health and their futures are at risk. I'd like to tell you about my background. I grew up in a devout Christian family in California. My parents were leaders in our church congregation. My childhood is filled with happy memories of attending church, learning how to put faith into action through mission trips and serving our community. I decided to go to seminary and become an ordained minister so that I can serve others. I currently work at a local neighborhood center in urban Indianapolis, where I collaborate with local agencies and neighbors to improve the quality of life in our neighborhood. In 2015, I met and fell in love with my best friend Josh, who is here with me today. Like me, Josh is also a Christian who believes that faith is a verb. It's about how we live our lives. And like me, Josh had decided to wait until marriage to have sex. Once we got engaged, we knew we would not be ready to have children right away. So we started researching birth control options. Josh and I were on a tight budget as we struggled to pay off our student loans and save for a home. We were relieved that the Affordable Care Act requires health plans to cover birth control at no additional cost to us. On my doctor's advice, I decided to get an IUD. But what I got was a nightmare and a $1,200 bill. It turned out my insurance company had a religious objection to covering my birth control. Nothing in our faith disapproves of birth control. We were making prudent and responsible decisions for our family. But our beliefs and our decisions were overridden by the religious beliefs of an insurance company. In the days leading up to our wedding and for several months after, I was fighting with my insurance company, sending appeal after appeal. In the end, Josh and I scrounged together the money, but we had to use the money we had set aside to pay off our student loans and buy our first home together. I still feel a pit in my stomach when I remember the stress and anxiety that we went through just as we were starting our new life together. But I know I am fortunate. I was ultimately able to pay that bill. But what happens to those who cannot pay for their birth control? What happens to those who face an impossible choice between getting the health care they need and putting food on the table, or paying for childcare, or staying in school? If Judge Kavanaugh is confirmed to the Supreme Court, access to affordable birth control will be in jeopardy. Just 3 years ago, Judge Kavanaugh heard a case which is about something similar to what Josh and I had experienced. In that case, Judge Kavanaugh would have allowed employers and universities to use religion to deny birth control coverage to individuals. If Judge Kavanaugh had his way, courts would give free rein to those who claim their religious beliefs override the law. As a Christian, I am against such broad interpretations of religious freedom. It is not right that employers may be allowed to use religion to avoid following the laws of the land. I fear that some will use this reasoning not to protect religion, but as a way to discriminate. I shudder to imagine what this means for real people, for the communities I work with every day. At this critical moment, when so much is on the line for women and their family, My faith guides me. Proverbs 31, 8 through 9 says, "Speak out for those who cannot speak, for the rights of all the destitute. Speak out, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and needy." As a person of deep faith, I would never impose my religious beliefs on anyone, and no one else should either. My religious beliefs are separate from the law, and that's how it should be. But Judge Kavanaugh's record shows he does not respect this critical separation. This committee and the Senate must weigh the harmful impact that Judge Kavanaugh would have on the health and well-being of so many people. I urge this committee to block his nomination to the Supreme Court. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Baker. Now, Ms. Cizrak.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Feinstein, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to address the committee about my former Harvard Law School professor, Judge Kavanaugh. I took Judge Kavanaugh's separation of powers class in the winter term of 2009. In the years since, he has served as a trusted mentor to me. My experience as Judge Kavanaugh's student and mentee has led me to offer my firm support of his nomination to the Supreme Court of the United States. In some ways, my support for Judge Kavanaugh is unsurprising. A recent New York Times article cataloged the exceptionally strong reviews that Judge Kavanaugh's students have given to his teaching. Over the years, students' anonymous feedback forms have consistently lauded the judge as an outstanding professor, one who strives to present a balanced view of the material in class and who makes himself uniquely accessible to students outside of the classroom. I wholeheartedly agree with that praise. Multiple articles have also detailed Judge Kavanaugh's role as a mentor and sponsor for young lawyers, many of them females and minorities. You have heard about Judge Kavanaugh's impressive record of hiring women and diverse law clerks. But Judge Kavanaugh's efforts as a mentor are not limited to his clerks. He also works to maintain connections with countless law students and young lawyers across the country. Judge Kavanaugh is an invaluable resource and advocate for those starting out in the profession and a champion of diversity in the legal world. Ever since I took his class, he has been a mentor and a sponsor, offering friendly advice, helpful support, and a listening ear as I've navigated the stages of my legal career. When I was considering applying for a Supreme Court clerkship, Judge Kavanaugh generously offered his advice and support, helping me to obtain a clerkship with Chief Justice Roberts. And when I went back to work after having my first child, a lunch with Judge Kavanaugh helped bolster my enthusiasm for my legal career. In other ways, however, my support for Judge Kavanaugh may strike some as surprising. I am a registered Democrat, and from 2010 to 2011, I had the great honor of serving as a law clerk for then Judge, now Chief Judge, Merrick Garland on the D.C. Circuit. In that role, I experienced firsthand what a brilliant, fair, and kind jurist he is. I believe the judiciary and the country as a whole has suffered greatly from the failure to confirm Chief Judge Garland to the Supreme Court. I nonetheless support Judge Kavanaugh's confirmation. In my view, preserving and protecting the integrity of the judiciary means supporting and confirming highly qualified judicial nominees, regardless of whether one agrees with the politics of the party that nominated them. In my experience, Judge Kavanaugh has the traits that make him eminently qualified to serve as a justice on the United States Supreme Court. His impressive intellect is obvious, but the judge is also open-minded, he is principled, and he is even-handed. I'd like to speak a little more about each of those qualities. First, in my interactions with Judge Kavanaugh, he has always demonstrated open-mindedness and intellectual integrity. When I think back on the judge's separation of powers class, it isn't his lectures I remember. It is his insightful questions and the classroom debates they sparked. The course touched on some of the most important issues in our constitutional democracy: But rather than telling us what to think about them, the judge asked questions that enabled us to develop our own views and share them with the class. More than that, he seemed genuinely interested in hearing our varying perspectives. One of my favorite law school memories is engaging in a fierce debate with a separation of powers classmate over whether INS versus Chadha was correctly decided. Judge Kavanaugh seemed delighted to hear both sides, and he encouraged us to develop our conflicting views. With Judge Kavanaugh, I was confident that if I could make the right argument, he would accept my position. My belief in Judge Kavanaugh's open-mindedness has deepened over the years through my one-on-one conversations with him. I often can't resist sharing my views on separation of powers issues, and he is invariably an engaged listener and an insightful questioner, despite the fact that we come from different sides of the political aisle. Second, in my experience, Judge Kavanaugh is highly principled. By that, I mean something very specific. He carefully delineates the difference between policy preferences and what the law demands. In the separation of powers class, we often discussed current events and the way they implicated various constitutional concerns. Policy considerations inevitably came up, and we certainly discussed those. But the judge would repeatedly remind us that those policy concerns are beside the point if the Constitution dictates a different outcome. More generally, the judge taught us that the way to discern the legal principles that undergird our democratic system is to look to the text, history, and precedents regarding the Constitution, not our policy preferences. Third, Judge Kavanaugh is even-handed and treats people fairly and with respect. In class, he gave the same consideration